गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉट। गना शॉट में आप सबका स्वागत है। Today we are going to discuss something very interesting. We're going to tell Pakistan no more nuclear blackmail. And why am I getting to this? The Prime Minister has already told Pakistan no more nuclear blackmail, enough is enough. But soon after this, two things have happened. One is, in Singapore, General Shamsher Mirza, who's the chief of general staff of Pakistan Army, went and made this statement.
Not being, you can't hear him.
Right. What he says is, in a veiled threat, he says, in the absence of a mechanism to resolve the conflict and manage the conflict, the global powers might be too late to intervene, which is a veiled nuclear threat. He's still continuing to give that nuclear threat. And secondly, what he said in that is that he's kept all his options open. Secondly, Bilawal Bhutto has gone to New York as part of the team, and there he said, look, there might be a nuclear war over water. The threat of nuclear war over water also is something which he has enunciated. Now, it appears that Pakistan has not got off its old song of everything, anything you do is nuclear. It is in this context that I requested Brigadier Arun Sahgal to come and discuss with us. We've spoken of this a little earlier, but in the changed context of Brigadier Op Sindoor and what's happened, we need to discuss this afresh and clarify a few issues to Pakistan. Sir, with this as a backdrop, I'd request you to weigh in on what are these chaps speaking of still? Haven't they got the Prime Minister's message? And what do you think will be the nuclear dynamics going hereafter? After all, there's a lot of space which has been created, below nuclear threshold for conventional action. Or is it the other way around that the space is closed? What is it they're trying to say? I'd like you to decode all this and put it across. Over to you, sir.
To the best of my ability, let me try and answer these very important issues. Okay, let me start by highlighting to the listeners what is the Pakistani nuclear doctrinal thinking. I mean, we have to get to the bottom of that before we see as to why are they ranting, why are they talking the language which they're talking out. The fundamental issue as far as Pakistan is concerned is the nuclear weapons are seen to undermine India's asymmetric conventional power advantage over all spheres. And in that, they are looking at, when I say all spheres, their spheres are from tactical to operational to strategic. It is doing that by developing capabilities along with its conventional capabilities, its nuclear capabilities, and plus posturing shallow nuclear thresholds. The fundamental lesson which they learned from Balakot was, and rightly or wrongly, was that India will try and create space for conventional escalation under nuclear threshold. Pakistan would contest that space, and they brought in a dictum in their own strategic lingo called Q plus.
QPQ plus. QPQ plus. Quid
Ah,
pro quo plus.
quid pro quo plus. That's that's what they brought into this whole issue, which in which they talked about the fact is that they will be able to respond to any medium level escalation by India, and when that fails, they will resort to nuclear posturing. But there is a fundamental perception in the minds of the Pakistani military planners, particularly the nuclear planners, and that is based on the fact is the doctrinal of use. What is their doctrine of use? Now, that's a dilemma that they face. They have developed tactical nuclear weapons for tactical posturing. They have medium to relatively intermediate range ballistic missiles Shaheen 2, which are and they're also now developing is nuclear capability at sea, etc. The whole idea basically is to prevent large scale conventional conflict, which the Pakistanis realize beyond a certain period would become very inimical for them to manage, and therefore they will start posturing nuclear weapons. In their strategic thinking, they are saying is that even in the first and the second rung, they will manage. For the third rung becomes very difficult, very problematic. They will start posturing nuclear capability, nuclear weapons, etc. For them, large nuclear forces supported by relative conventional capabilities is deemed as a perfect deterrence that they had created, and they believed that this was the answer to what happened in Balakot. So there was a sense of living on their laurels, sense of perception that we have managed to create a situation where any kind of India's attempt at large scale escalation would be managed by them, and if it cannot be managed, they will always be able to do nuclear posturing. Nuclear posturing also in terms of getting the international players involved, etc., etc., etc. And to do that, they believed that would be a defining norm or to restrain India from further escalation. So what happens in this scenario? Unconventional conflict or low intensity conflict continues. They can raise the level. Pahalgam is an example. Before that, Pulwama was an example. And the consequences of that they can manage so that they can come back tomorrow again to raise the same level of terrorist leverage terrorism and continue to bleed India through the what they call as a policy of thousand cuts, or continuously put India on the back foot in terms of dealing with terrorism. Now, what has happened in Op Sandhu is entirely something different. It is the beyond the realm of their understanding. Like the two esteemed Pakistani analysts in a paper in Dawn have highlighted is that a 26-year-old policy of full spectrum deterrence and Q plus Q plus, quid pro quo plus, QPQ plus have failed, have not been able to deliver. Why are they saying so? What happened in Sandhu? We have to understand it from the strategic perspective point of view. What happened in Sandur was, first and foremost, what India did was that India, in its response to the Pahalgam attack, did not only stick to his response in the Pakistani occupied Jammu and Kashmir, but went to the jugular of the terrorist infrastructure. In going through the jugular of the terrorist infrastructure, India went into heartland Pakistan and attacked Bahawalpur and Muridke. The two places where Jaish camps are there, and as we all understand, is where the
Abilities.
Lashkar-e-Taiba
Abilities.
elite is there. So this was the narrative. When this happened, Pakistan reacted violently, and they reacted by attacking India's military and civilian targets through drones, through missiles, and through standoff attack weapon systems. This happened despite the fact India had gone and told Pakistan in very credible, clear terms, is that whatever we did was a response to your terrorist strike. And we have no intentions of escalation. I mean, this was our calibrated response to Pahalgam, and that is what it is. Now, this is where this whole doctrinal thinking of the Pakistani perception comes in. I want the viewers to understand this. The reason why the Pakistan reacted in the fashion in which they reacted, large-scale drone attack, conventional missile system, attacking our military targets, attacking our civilian infrastructure, they believed that the response from India would be equally calibrated and hence manageable. But India did not react in the same manner. India changed the playbook. What did India do? India changed the playbook by degrading through a very effective air power actions by us to degraded their entire air defense systems. The Chinese air defense system practically collapsed. Once that happened, and two other things happened for them. One is the effectiveness of our systems, the manner of our strikes, the precision capacities and capabilities, the integration of ISR navigation and our electronic components of our strikes befuddled them, completely befuddled them. They were taken aback.
So that, I mean, may I come in, sir, if you don't mind? I mean, because you made a very important point, which I want everyone to understand. And that is fundamental to understanding what Brigadier Sahgal is going to say hereafter. What he said is the Pakistan's belief that, look, if India does anything across the IB or the LOC, come back with the QPQ plus or quid pro quo plus in mass, cause damage, claim victory. And do not allow, because the nuclear umbrella or the nuclear threshold was so, as per them, so low that India cannot respond. And even if it responds, they'll be able to manage the victory. And that playbook got smashed. And then they were left at odds with themselves. Sorry, sir. I thought this was very important.
So, post Balakot discussions in my track 2 group, I had come back and made a report which I have highlighted that in the next round of our interaction, kinetic interaction with Pakistan, we would at least have to consider not 1, 2, but up to 3 plus levels of escalation. And we have to be very clear in our mind as to what are those 3 levels of escalation. India was prepared. Bottom line, India was prepared. India was prepared for escalation. And how did it escalate? First level was our attack on their nuclear infrastructure, across the board attack on nuclear infrastructure. The second one was degradation of the
terrorist infrastructure.
First was terrorist infrastructure.
You said nuclear.
We don't know. Yeah. Nuclear was not touched at all. We are not concerned with nuclear. We indicated to the Pakistanis we had a limited purpose. The Pakistanis, in the euphoria of managing escalation with India, and we're able to with the whole concept of QPQ plus, that they launched this massive attack on us, and then India responded by degrading his air defenses and causing a large amount of damage to his aircraft, etc., as is now coming out. Then on the early night of 9th, 10th, the Pakistan was in a preparation. This is again something which is not coming out very clearly. Pakistan was prepared to launch a massive assault on India, again with missiles, drones, and aircrafts. 40 aircrafts are already ready and are airborne for that system. Some reports indicated that it will be launched early morning because that was the night of redemption, so to say, of the Pakistani military. But what happened thereafter was that it is not Pakistan who responded. They did, but they did at about 12 o'clock or 12:30 in the night, which again was their attack did not make much headway. They launched
Shaheens.
believably some Hatam missile. They launched Khalids against us, which were all intercepted well in time, etc. They did not make any dent on India. At this stage, India decided to retaliate in a major retaliation into the guts of Pakistan, the heartland of Pakistan. Starting from north to south, 12, 13 number of airfields were attacked. Not only the number of airfields were attacked, the strategic, non-nuclear strategic assets, the command and control centers, both of the UAS systems in Muridke as well as in Nurkha, as well as Chaklala, were attacked. This was something you have to see the videos now that are coming out of Pakistan subsequently to indicate the state of damage and the state of panic that is created. Pakistani was simply not prepared. And again, here the hubris comes in. The hubris is coming in primarily because the Nuclear Command Authority of Pakistan, which is supposedly be run by the Prime Minister of India, is de facto being controlled by the Chief of the Army Staff, who, although a member, but who controls everything because the SPD chief reports to him. Although again not directly under him, but this is the aspect which the viewers have to understand. The Nuclear Command Authority of Pakistan has got two components. There is an employment committee. There is a technical committee. The technical committee operates under the Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff, responsible for developing weapon systems, but the employment committee is headed by the Prime Minister. But de facto control, and SPD is their secretariat, and there are strategic forces command separately from Army, Navy, Air Force. But here, the issue is that the de facto control is by the Army Chief, who alone decided the level of escalation on the night of 9th, 10th. This is important for our people to understand. India's reaction to hit the airfields in the manner that we hit, degrade his command systems, both his UAS as well as to some extent his conventional strike post command systems, C2 ISRs, were all part, C3 ISRs, not C4, but C3 ISR, were all part of a response mechanism that we had created. We because of the Pakistan's attempt at escalation. Now, what has happened in this game? What has happened in this game is that the Pakistani thought that India's response would never reach this level or this tier of escalation. Why? Because they said it will be a graded response mechanism. You do this, I will do this, you do this plus, we'll continue to do this, and we'll continue to play this little game of Chinese checker or let's say Ludo. You climb the ladder and I'll come down, etc., etc. That kind of a story will go on. No, India responded credibly, with precision, and emphatically at large number of his assets, completely taking him by surprise. What happens now? The Pakistani Nuclear Command Authority decides to go into action. The announcement is made that the Pakistani Nuclear Command Authority is going to meet, and immediately after that, in couple of hours, another announcement is made. No, Nuclear Command Authority is not meeting. There is no intention to make the Nuclear Command Authority meet. Now, please understand why these two events takes place. I also want the listeners to understand that what does mean by Nuclear Command Authority means. Nuclear Command Authority is an act of brinkmanship and a clear act of escalation. Have no doubt. Let me repeat. It's brinkmanship and escalation. Nuclear Command Authority, when made, it takes stock of the state of preparedness of its nuclear assets. deployments, how the meeting will be done, etc., etc., and what is the kind of a nuclear posture they want to create. At this stage, when this nuclear command authority is meeting, there is one more element that has occurred. Again, this is something which we need to understand. And that element basically is this, is that tactical nuclear weapons, which was a part of his graduated response strategy against conventional war with India, no longer is in play. What is he going to fight? Will use the tactical nuclear weapons. There is no
Ground offensives.
war. It's all standoff war. So now what happens is that he has to now fall back on his operational and strategic posture. Now, operational
So,
and strategic posture is where the whole cookie starts to crumble. When he starts
so
moving
I
in
think there's
that,
a very important thing. No, there's a very important thing you made. I think
sure,
I want to elucidate this.
sure.
Look, what is important is Pakistan has got tactical nuclear weapons, which are short range weapons, which are meant against our so called cold start strategy, so that, to be used against our force. We didn't use that. We didn't use our ground forces. We just hit his rear with everything. So he didn't have a target also. So the complete tactical nuclear capability of Pakistan was put to rest. It was set aside. It was actually taken out of the equation completely. He could not have used this tactical nuclear weapons. And this is a very important point which has happened in this. So the moment we did what we did, because it was a standoff attacks, it was non-contact battle. In non-contact battle, the tactical nuclear weapons, which were meant for tactical targets, are not there because the tactical target didn't appear only. This is the
Exactly.
point which, yeah, please, sir.
Okay, so now, now what happens? His fallback position is on operational, operational what? Again, there is nothing. So he has to go to look at strategic. When we say operational and strategic, the basic difference between these two things is that operationals are basically counter force targeting. You target other guys' assets, etc. And counter value targeting is that you go into a sort of sitting busting kind of mechanism, hitting his critical infrastructure, etc., etc. Basically, going into a mutually assured deterrence posture, particularly when you're dealing with another nuclear power. So, this is a critical aspect. So, what happened on that night of 10th is the Pakistan's attempt to escalate were picked up by the Americans and other players. They saw the movement over there, and huge amount of pressure was brought into the Pakistanis. Don't do the route. Don't go that route because you cannot get away with starting a nuclear war. I mean, it's not acceptable to anybody starting a nuclear war. It's another point we also have to have as just as an aside. Please understand, like we were prepared for Pakistan's escalation in terms of integrated air defense, our response capabilities, etc., etc., etc. We were also must have been. I'm only speculating as an analyst here now. We must have been closely looking at his moves, particularly in his strategic domain, and seeing what kind of information is being passed, what kind of actions are being taken. And based on that, which obviously indicate to me as an analyst, is to indicate to him that he had started making some kind of a preparation to activate his nuclear capability. And that's why guys outside the region got panicky. He must also realize that once another opponent picks up these kind of actions, he also starts taking a similar kind of actions and counter actions. So we are not looking at this thing in isolation. There is no isolation. The impact levels are that if you are starting to upgrade your posture, nuclear posture, from status 1, 2, 3 to whatever status you are wanting to put it on to, and you are started making some moves, the communications exchanges are taking place, etc., etc. Please be rest assured that the other side would be picking up this thing and would be taking necessary defensive steps to deal with such kind of a situation. So we are looking at a kind of a nuclear standoff perspective. And it is not easy at this stage, even for a military controlled nation like Pakistan, who's with a Ganga Ho chief of army staff, who was trying to fire everything under the sun that he had against India earlier in the night, to realize that Pakistan going down that road is going to be disaster, not only for the country but for the entire region. There's something nobody is going to allow. Coupled with that is this whole story of some strategic asset command and control center being hit in Kirana Hills. We probably will. Some action has taken place. People believe there is some action that has taken place, and that the whole command and control center has got buried down inside, etc. That was another element which sort of refrained Pakistan from escalation, primarily because its entire communications were all charred. They were all burnt. He did not have command and control system available. So the issue that is emerging out of this is this: are 2-3 things. We have to understand these things. One is that at the level at which Pakistan found himself, he had only one option open to him, and that is strategic escalation, or let's give him some operational and some level, but fundamentally strategic escalation, which is going in for counter force, counter value targeting at a larger scale, something which would have started a nuclear contest in the region. That is something which is highly unacceptable, purely because, like I said, other side will also be ready. And I'll give you an example of how difficult decision making in these elements is. Please see what happened in the recent strike of the nuclear bombers by the Ukrainians. In terms of Article 9 of the Russian doctrine, the strategic deterrence of Russia was breached. The strategic deterrence under Article 9, which talks about if some nuclear assets are destroyed, Russia would respond with nuclear capability. But what did Putin do? He did not term that issue as an attack by Ukrainian, but called it a terrorist attack. Primarily because, apart from multiple other factors which I don't want to go in right now, is primarily because he wanted not to take the decision of use on nuclear weapons at this stage, or a nuclear response against Ukraine. Ideally speaking, in deterrence terms, in his doctrinal terms, he would have been well within his rights to take the response, to respond by launching what is called a limited nuclear strike on Ukraine, but he did not. So the point which is important is this: is how does this point relate to conventional space? So what is important for us to understand is this: the conventional space below nuclear threshold is not as limited as Pakistan would like us to believe. It is all related to degree of degradation and degree of punishment that the other side suffers, and what are his options at that stage. People are talking about India should have done this, India should have responded much more, India should have done this, we are let's put a defensive power, etc. There are some editorials which have come out today. But the point we have to understand is this: the whole ideation of India's response was messaging. And what were the two critical messages? The first message was, as the Prime Minister of our country has just now mentioned the other day, is that you cannot play the nuclear blackmail card and use terrorism as a carte blanche. Acts of terrorism in India which impact us, which are supported by you, and we've seen enough evidence that you support them, will be responded with strong military response. We have, by and large, kept our response related to terrorist targeting infrastructure, targeting terrorist infrastructure in your country. What we did was at this time was we escalated it to their seminaries and other places from where the infrastructure terrorists are being trained and produced. But it was still terrorism. It is Pakistan who escalated. It's something which our people must understand. Pakistan escalated to conventional domain using all kinds of systems against us, against our military and civilian targets. So this is where the importance is. So that's why we created the space. And India was well within its rights for a conventional response that came on the night of 8th, 9th, and 9th, 10th, because Pakistan had initiated a conventional war of sorts. So, to use nuclear analogy at this stage, that my nuclear red lines were being crossed, I think it was very I think I would say it was not disingenuous on the part of Pakistan, and they realized it. And the editorials now coming out are realizing the fact is that strong Indian conventional response. How do we deal with it? How do we handle it? From Indian side, the perspective is that we have not done any strong conventional response. We have simply responded to your acts of conventional attacks on us, and we have responded with the kind of capability and credibility that we have, which will only improve as that goes by, and you have to be prepared for it. So what is the answer? The answer is stop terrorism, QED. There is no. So the nuclear card, where does the nuclear card fit in? The nuclear card is there. It is there. But the question is, what India has told you is that you can't use the nuclear card at a drop of a hat. A. B. If you play ball, if you play like a normal neighbor, if you want to have a good relationship, start terrorist network, there is no nuclear card between us. There is no nuclear card. So don't play it. And you think you can use nuclear card against another nuclear power which is much stronger, much credible, with strong technological capability? I don't think it's something which makes sense to anybody. Although, mind you, the Western discourse, I was just listening this morning to a couple of senior nuclear analysts in the United States of America talking about how thresholds are being crossed and how the third nuclear age has come in when there is a standoff between two nuclear powers. No. The standoff between two nuclear powers will be responsible standoff, because those nuclear powers also understand what it means to go down the route. But what has happened in this case is the Pakistan has been now forced to rethink their entire nuclear doctrine, which was based on preventing using terrorism as a card in the hope of depicting low thresholds and trying to scare the other side that if you escalate, I will use nuclear weapons. Sadly, I have attended 3, 4, 5 of these kind of games which have been played, sponsored largely by the American think tanks, which tends to play this little game at what level with the tactical nuclear weapons will be used, etc., etc., etc. What we have done in this case is important point is that we remove the tactical nuclear weapons by and large from the equation. And we have reasserted India's nuclear doctrine of no first use, non-recognition of any limited nuclear strikes, etc., but no first use backed up by punitive response capability. And India hopes that better sense prevails and both countries do not go down the nuclear route, because there is only mutually assured destruction over there. There is nothing else. And I think Pakistani leadership understands. And I also believe at some stage, during this contest of 4 days, the Pakistani political authority has asserted themselves. I see that signs of those assertions by the Pakistani political authority that they did not allow the military a complete hand and to allow them to cross the Rubicon and take the region into destruction.
So thank you. I think the last point you made is very important. Uh, the fact is that much as we thought that the nuclear button and the nuclear decision is with the Chief of Army Staff of Pakistan, what actually transpired was that it wasn't so. He didn't have it completely, and it is there that the pressure came. Probably the pressure didn't come onto him directly. It probably came onto the prime minister, and the prime minister had no choice but to assert himself. So, in effect, a very important fallout of this, of Sindoor, is that the nuclear control, command and control, didn't operate the way Pakistanis thought would operate. Am I right?
You're absolutely correct.
In their own way, in their own systems.
We should be slightly assured. I wouldn't say not totally,
Yeah.
slightly assured that the credibility of the civilian control in Pakistan, which prevents military to take decisions on its own perceptions without taking larger political points into consideration, has been exercised. Or let's put it this way, the political establishment in Pakistan has exercised positive control over nuclear weapons, denying the negative control to the military.
Military. I think that's a big shift. It might not be a very reassuring shift at this point of time, but I think it's a big shift which has happened not by talk but by practice.
Yes.
Practically, it is not possible, to get away with nuclear blackmail is the big thing. The second thing, so this is my hypothesis. My hypothesis is that at no stage in this Op Sindoor could Pakistan have used their nuclear weapons. I mean, and I'll give you my logic to it. By 10th morning, they had lost all air defense capability and ability to retaliate.
Absolutely true.
Whether it is ground-based air defense or aerial-based air defense, they had no air defense left. One. Second, our air defense was completely intact. Completely intact. Even your asset capability, everything was intact. Nothing had gone off. But for them, it was all flat out. It left them in a stage of huge asymmetry and decision making. Okay, let's take a hypothetical case that he did launch a missile. With the complete air defense capability of ours on our side, we had a good chance of intercepting it in Pakistan, whether it's through S-400 or other systems.
Yes.
Right? In which case, the damage of any nuclear, action would have been in Pakistan itself. Right? That was the imminent danger in which they were, because and whatever we did as counter air defense on those missile system or anti-ballistic systems, whatever you call it, they didn't have any counter to it. That's the first thing, whether electronic or hard or soft or kinetic. Second, should we have gone in for a nuclear option? Hypothetical, completely hypothetical. Their air defense was completely down. They couldn't have stopped it. Their HQ9 was down. There were a lot of windows available through which you could have exploited. Completely hypothetical, technically speaking, they didn't have. So I think in this kind of a scenario, I don't think anyone with the same view in Pakistan could have ever taken a decision to go nuclear. I'd like your views on this, sir.
Okay. Fundamental issue is, sir, what you say, rightly speaking, given our air defense capabilities intact. See, one of the aspects which they always talk about is that another issue that came about, which is related to your issue, is use of missiles. One of the arguments which has always been given is when I am using my nuclear capable missiles, there is a perception that how do I know it is not carrying a nuclear weapon? So this is a perception. This again, the credibility of the India's air defense and the way it stalled almost all Pakistani missile attacks should make Pakistanis understand that even if they were to launch nuclear capable missile systems, they would be intercepted well before time, well before they reach their targets. So if they are intercepted well before their targets, the issue is, like you rightly said, the collateral damage of that interception will be in Pakistan. And this is primarily because of the distances. We will be able to intercept him at 300, 350, 400 kilometers. He has to perforce be in depth to launch those kind of weapon systems. The period he takes off and the period of interception would invariably be across the border in his this thing, or maybe just touching the border line, that kind of scenario. So there is a huge chances of all collateral damage falling onto his side. So this is something which is very important. The second issue they have to also understand is that in a in a strike, in a manner, this is something was I don't think is never actually come out in this kind of a fashion. This is a good lesson that we were in an advanced air defense environment where all our systems were functional. Okay. So our air assets, space assets are all working at this thing. The pickup is taking place well in time. So, and there is a new discourse that is coming up is launch under attack or launch on warning, under warning. So, technically speaking, if we take the old concept of the Cold War into account, where the missile with nuclear capable missile, if launched, so we deemed to be carrying a nuclear weapon. So I hypothetically, if I launch my missile with the similar weapons, I would be well within my right because I'll be doing my protecting my country. So the question basically is this launch on warning and launch under attack concepts come into play. And here again, the India's money that we have spent in developing a ballistic air missile defense system that we have done over a period of years, and we have reached a fairly high degree of assurances would come into play. So to answer to your question is that the Pakistani missile launch against India under the circumstances where all systems are prepared and operational, it will be very difficult for them to get, and there is a high chances of those attacks being intercepted well before they hit the targets. Should India have launched? I do not think India would take the prize because no, there is a logic behind India's using, and this is something our people must understand. India has always looked upon nuclear weapons as political weapons. They do not look at nuclear weapons as a war fighting weapon. And at no stage the political context was created for India to use nuclear weapons. So, as a responsible nuclear power, India will not use nuclear weapons. India has no reason to use nuclear weapons. Yes, if their system, if their major nuclear strike had penetrated and launched, say, let's put it away, 2 weapons or 3 weapons on India, then of course India would retaliate as per its doctrine. And that we all know what the doctrine is all about. And there is no question about it. So the logic, basically, what I'm trying to get at is, and you made a very telling point, and the telling point is the efficacy of even the nuclear capable systems when we are in an advanced stage of fully integrated air defense and anti-ballistic missile environment, that efficacy in this scenario can be looked upon and studied more in detail how to degrade such systems which are coming into us. And second point is that all such systems which are intercepted are likely to fall more likely into the neighboring territory of Pakistan, primarily because of the ranges of interception. This is the point I have, but this is an aspect from my perspective. I think I need to study a little more in detail before I come to any conclusions.
Yeah, thank you, sir. You clarified a lot of things. The last question I'll get back when we started. I know that audio of that clip got muted. But what do you make of this chief of general staff still clinging on to the notion that he can play the nuclear card, a veiled nuclear threat, and Bilawal Bhutto going and talking in New York or wherever about the next war or water will lead to a nuclear war and all that? Is it just continuing with their hype, or
No,
their
no.
sense has not dawned on them?
No, sir, there is a discourse, global discourse on disarmament. There is a global discourse on nuclear escalation, the consequences of escalation. There is a discourse on the third nuclear age, how in partnerships the countries are can launch assaults on other countries, and how they can exploit non-state actors can exploit. A lot of these discourses. This whole idea is to play on the minds of the Western audience, which looks at these things from a perspective of a nuclear war starting tomorrow morning, and look at them as hugely destabilizing acts. You know, and put the fear of destabilization on them in the hope of their intervention. Their hope of the intervention to prevent escalation of conflicts in the region. Now, Pakistan's game is very simple. Say, lion has come, lion has come, lion has come, lion has come and eat me up, eat me up, eat me up, do something about it, otherwise I will be helpless, etc., etc. And so that kind of a story. So they say, India is with water, I have no option, my people are going to die, and therefore I have no option but to use nuclear weapon. How absurd a thing can it be? Who believes this kind of nonsense? And also, I just given a full discourse of how the Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff's attempt to say that India's 1.5 billion population includes Pakistan is also in that. When he says 1.5, I presume so, are under the threat of a nuclear extinction. The bottom line is very simple. The threat is by you. You are the one who says I'm going to use nuclear weapons. I am not using nuclear weapons. I have my doctrine is very clear. For us, nuclear weapons are political weapons for war avoidance, not for war usage. You are saying our weapons are for my total stability. But strategic stability depends on the continuum of conventional and nuclear. That's what your doctor's thinking about. You read the revised remarks. He says, yes, we are a responsible nuclear power. We will not use nuclear weapons. But if my states is there an existential damage to Pakistan, I will use nuclear weapons. We have not said we will use nuclear weapons if there is existential damage to Pakistan. What does existential damage to Pakistan means? He talks about some red lines. What are those red lines? What does the red line mean in real number, real terms? And you think you're very clever by half by not indicating those red lines. This is exactly what India has done. India has pushed Pakistan to define its red lines. Pakistan has not defined its red lines. Now we are very clear. Up to the first and second tier of airfields being degraded by, and your entire air defense being degraded, and you are being left naked in terms of all kinds of surveillance capability. is still not your red line because you did not indicate anything. So what do we get? So playing around with this red line narrative, this is my red line, that my red line, you don't cross my red line, etc., means nothing. It is basic issue in this game is very simple. Nuclear weapons are not for use. Number two, the important lesson of Om Sindoor is don't play the nuclear card. It will not save you. And nuclear card is not a card which can prevent escalation. The other side will escalate to an extent that it has to escalate. It will create the space for this escalation. And in case of India, they are lucky. India is a responsible power. We are not escalating to destroy Pakistan or create a huge amount of degradation in terms of assets, manpower, and kind of damage to the people of Pakistan. No, we are not. A simple point to you is stop using terrorism, boys. Its time is enough. Time has taken place. You have had enough chance. Stop using terrorism. That's the message. And that's the message that Pakistan has taken. I assume it is taken. But let's see.
So with the kind of statements which are coming out, I don't think they have taken it. And if you go by what the analysis which we saw or read in Dawn together indicates that they might do something, but what they'll do, how they'll do, is something which is to be seen. Tomorrow is their budget session, and if you see some of the thinking which is coming out of their budget, they're going back to the time when Bhutto said we'll eat grass. They are saying, look, it doesn't matter anything that we need to. What India, the Op Sindoor has taught us is that we have to put more money for defense, even if it's at the cost of everything else. They will take as it is 45% of Pakistan is in poverty. They will take 80% or 90% of people into poverty, but they will go ahead, and we have challenges ahead. I think that is what we have to see. Because
Absolutely.
this scenario might not repeat itself, and we'll have to see different scenarios where we'll have to play our cards differently. So anything else you have to say, or I'll take a few questions, sir?
Thank you, sir. Let's